There are words you say every day without even realizing it. They come out almost automatically, mixed into your routine, into ordinary conversations, into impulsive reactions. Words that seem harmless, normal, even acceptable. But what if some of them are silently pulling you away from the peace God promised? What if what comes out of your mouth is revealing more about the condition of your heart than you imagine? Jesus never wasted words. In a noisy world, where everyone feels the need to explain themselves, react, and defend themselves, he chose silence in crucial moments, not out of weakness, but out of deep trust in the Father. And this is exactly where many people get confused, because we were taught to talk too much, to justify everything, to respond to every provocation, when in fact the gospel invites us to the opposite path. The path of attentiveness, spiritual filtering, and inner surrender. Perhaps today you are tired without knowing exactly why. Tired of conflicts, of internal noise, of conversations that lead nowhere. And maybe the root of this is not in the circumstances, but in the words you have allowed to live inside you and come out of you. Jesus taught that the mouth speaks from what the heart is full of. This is not an accusation, it is an invitation. An invitation to look inward with honesty and allow God to deal with what no one sees. Stay with me until the end, because there are words that seem ordinary, but carry deep spiritual weight. Words that Jesus lovingly and wisely taught us to avoid. And understanding this can transform not only the way you speak, but the way you live. Jesus never treated speech as something superficial. For him, words were merely the reflection of something much deeper. The heart. That is why, when he taught, he did not begin by trying to control external behavior, but by directing attention inward. Because words do not come from nowhere. They spring from cultivated thoughts, untreated emotions, and silent wounds that we often ignore. There is a great spiritual deception in believing that the problem lies only in what was said. Jesus made it clear that before correcting the mouth, it is necessary to allow God to heal the interior. Harsh, impatient, defensive, or judgment-filled words reveal a tired, insecure, or misaligned heart. And as long as the root is not touched, the fruit keeps appearing. We live in a culture that encourages immediate reaction, saying everything you feel is seen as sincerity. But Jesus taught something different. He showed that not every feeling needs to be verbalized, because unprocessed emotions, when turned into words, can wound, divide, and destroy. How many deep wounds began with phrases spoken in moments of anger or frustration? Jesus invites us into a pause, a space between feeling and speaking. In that space, God works. It is there that the Holy Spirit begins to align the heart before a word is released. Speaking less in this context is not repression. It is spiritual wisdom. It is allowing transformation to begin where it truly matters. One of the most subtle traps Jesus warned us about is the constant need to explain ourselves, to justify every decision, every action, every silence, as if our lives needed a permanent speech in order to be validated. Jesus was direct when he said that our yes should be yes and our no should be no. Anything beyond that, according to him, does not come from an aligned heart, but from internal conflict. This is not about being rigid or insensitive. It is about integrity. A life rooted in God does not need excessive explanations to sustain itself. When we feel the urgency to verbally defend ourselves all the time, often it is not because of the people around us, but because of a silent insecurity within us. The search for human approval begins to speak louder than trust in the Father's care. Jesus did not live explaining himself. He did not try to control narratives or prove who he was. He knew who he was. And that inner security allowed him to remain silent, even when he was misunderstood. This kind of silence is not the absence of response. It is the presence of faith. When we learn to trust God more than the opinions of others, words decrease, the heart rests, and silence becomes a form of worship. Because those who trust the Father do not need to justify themselves to everyone. Truth, in the right time, stands on its own. Jesus was clear in warning us about the danger of premature judgment, not because discernment is wrong, but because judging places the other in an inferior position and feeds silent pride. Words of condemnation do not come from truth. but from a heart that has forgotten its own dependence on grace. They generate a momentary sense of superiority, but they weaken the spirit. Jesus corrected with authority without humiliating. He confronted without wounding. This balance reveals a heart fully submitted to the Father and calls us to speak truth always with love. When we observe the life of Jesus, it becomes evident that he avoided empty words. He did not speak to impress. He did not preach to show off. He did not use religious language to appear spiritual. His words were few, but full of life. This confronts us, because we live in a time when speaking well often replaces living deeply. Words full of appearance but empty of transformation have become common, even within religious environments. Jesus taught that God is not moved by long speeches, but by sincere hearts. True spirituality does not need an audience. It is silent, humble, and revealed in daily attitudes. When someone constantly feels the need to prove their faith through words, it may indicate a heart still seeking human validation rather than God's approval. There is spiritual power in silence lived with purpose. Silence is not the absence of faith. It is trust. Jesus withdrew, remained silent, observed, and in that silence he aligned himself with the Father. Even good words, when spoken excessively, can generate spiritual weariness. Talking all the time tires the soul. Silence, on the other hand, creates space for God to act. Perhaps today the invitation is simple, but profound. Speak less, live more. Let God's presence speak louder than any discourse. One of the greatest proofs of spiritual maturity is learning not to react to everything. Jesus showed us this clearly. In the face of false accusations, he remained silent. In the face of mockery, he stood firm. In the face of injustice, he trusted the Father. This silence was not passivity. It was self-control at its highest level. It was refined spiritual strength, the kind that does not need to prove itself. We live in a time when reacting has become synonymous with authenticity, but Jesus revealed that not every reaction comes from the Spirit. Many words are born from the flesh, from impulse, from the desire for revenge, or from the need for self-defense. Words spoken from that state do not produce life. They only prolong conflicts and delay spiritual processes. There are words that need to die within us so that God's life may grow. Impulsive words. Words that wound. Words born from pride or anxiety. Silencing these words is not self-erasure. It is obedience. It is trusting that God is working even when you say nothing. When we learn to live this kind of silence, something changes within us. The soul quiets. The heart rests. And God's presence becomes more perceptible. Silence, when guided by the Spirit, does not weaken us. On the contrary, it positions us in a place of deep spiritual authority. Not all the words Jesus taught us to avoid sound wrong at first. Some are socially accepted, spiritually disguised, and even common within Christian circles. But Jesus, who saw beyond appearances, knew that certain ways of speaking reveal a heart that has not yet learned to fully trust God. Words loaded with constant worry, for example, are often confessions of fear. Anxiety, when verbalized repeatedly, feeds its own restlessness. Jesus taught trust in the Father's care. He pointed to the lilies of the field and the birds of the air as living reminders that God provides. When our words contradict this trust, something within us begins to weaken. Faith erodes under the excess of spoken worry. There are also words born from spiritual self-promotion, phrases that exalt one's own righteousness, faith, or holiness. Jesus confronted this behavior harshly in the Pharisees. True spirituality does not announce itself, it reveals itself. What is secret does not need an audience. In addition, Jesus warned us against words that shift responsibility. Blaming people, circumstances, or even God hinders spiritual growth. Words shape attitudes, and when we learn to align our speech with trust, humility, and responsibility, we take a deep step towards spiritual maturity. There comes a moment in the spiritual journey when God begins to touch deeper areas that do not appear in external actions, but are revealed in automatic words. It is a silent breaking point. The Holy Spirit begins to alert us even before we speak. An internal pause arises, a subtle discomfort, an invitation to silence. Many ignore this call, but those who learn to listen to it begin to live a more mature faith. Jesus never forced transformation. He always invited. And following Jesus includes learning to restrain the tongue. This requires more than willpower. It requires daily dependence on God, because on our own, we repeat old patterns. We speak out of habit. We react out of impulse. We use words as defense or as weapons. But the Spirit calls us to speak from rest, not from anxiety. When we begin to silence what does not edify, something powerful happens. We start to hear more clearly, not only people but the voice of God. Silence stops being empty and becomes a place of encounter. It is there that God adjusts motivations, heals wounds, and transforms thoughts. Perhaps one of the greatest proofs of spiritual maturity is learning to live with silence without discomfort. Because when words decrease, spiritual sensitivity increases, and God begins to speak more clearly to a heart willing to listen. All of this leads us to a practical decision. The gospel was never just about agreeing, finding something beautiful, or being momentarily emotional. It has always called us to real transformation. And transforming speech requires inner surrender. It requires humility. It requires trust. Silencing what is born from anxiety, pride, or the need for control is not easy. But it is precisely in this place that God's presence becomes more perceptible. Jesus did not teach us to be silent out of fear, but to be silent out of faith. He knew that words spoken out of time can close doors God is still opening. He knew that impulsive reactions can delay spiritual processes. That is why he often chose to wait, observe, and trust that the Father was working even when he said nothing. When we accept this invitation, something changes deeply. Words become fewer, but full of life. Conversations begin to edify. The heart calms. Faith grows stronger. Many battles stop requiring a response because we understand that God is already taking care of them. If this message spoke to you, choose today to observe your words. Allow some to die so that others, aligned with the character of Christ, may be born. May your words be few but full of life. If this message touched your heart, I want to invite you to participate in a simple but profound way. Write in the comments which word, attitude, or type of speech you feel God is calling you to silence in this season. Not as exposure, but as an act of surrender and commitment before the Lord. Your comment may be exactly the encouragement someone else needs. Now, leave your like so this message can reach more lives who are also learning to hear God's voice in the midst of daily noise. Each like helps this content reach those who are tired, confused, or in need of spiritual direction. And if you want to continue growing spiritually, learning to live a more conscious, mature faith aligned with the teachings of Jesus, subscribe to the channel A Voce de Verdade. Here, every day we learn that not everything needs to be said, that silence is also obedience, and that often it is in silence that God speaks the loudest. May your words be few but full of life.